It is another crossover edition here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Chiefs coming to Jacksonville to try to find their first victory. We'll tell you all about it here in just a second.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Everybody, it's Tony Wiggins here along with Chris Clark. I am from Locked On Jaguars. He is from Locked On Chiefs. And we're here to do a crossover edition for you today. But first, we have to let you know we appreciate you making us your first listen because it's your team every day on both podcasts. We are free to subscribe to on our respective pages on YouTube. You can make sure you hit the like button and hit the bell to make sure you receive notifications. And wherever you get your podcast from an audio perspective, just make sure that you tap in every single day to make sure you don't miss an episode. And this crossover Thursday episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match of up to $100. And we would first like to also welcome in all of our everydayers for our respective shows. We call them everydayers because they come in every day. And if you want to be an everydayer, just come back every day too. And if it's your first time, hopefully you'll enjoy this podcast. Now let's get down to the business. Both of us are going to jump behind enemy lines real quick, but I got to speak to my man, Chris Clark. What's up, man?
How's it going, Tony?
It's going. How's it going for y'all? Well, you know what? Week one didn't go so well.
No, week one didn't go well.
Week one didn't go so well.
Rough going at it when you have two of your superstars miss the game for different reasons. But we'll see how this week goes.
Yeah, we will see how it goes. So we're going to start out with the first segment. Let me tell everybody what's going to happen. We're going with the biggest storylines first. Segment number 2, we're going to look at the biggest matchups. Segment number 3, we'll split it with what leads to a victory for both teams, and then we'll make a prediction. All right. Biggest storylines for you, sir. Since you're the visitor, I'm going to let you go first. Tell me the biggest storylines for the Kansas City Chiefs.
I appreciate that. And I said last week on a crossover, I kind of had two, and it's really hard to choose. Travis Kelce getting injured was one, and Chris Jones not being there was the other. Chris Jones is back. He should play against the Jaguars. Now, whether or not he's going to play very many snaps is going to be a big question. How acclimated he can get to the defense. He's obviously going to know the defense, but how many snaps he can take after not being in football shape, after not having any kind of training camp is going to be the real question. And the other reality is for Kansas City, it's still kind of a two-story deal. The question is Travis going to play or is he not going to play? We won't know until the probably kickoff. I would imagine he's going to end up being questionable again this week. But unfortunately, I don't know that we'll really have an idea of whether or not he's going to play until about 90 minutes before the game starts.
All right, most of yours are trying to get back healthy people. I think for the biggest storyline for the Jacksonville Jaguars is this, and it's real. It's not complex, but it's a little bit nuanced. Just go out and play the game. Don't worry about getting revenge for last year's playoff game. Because in 2018, after they lost to the Patriots, it seemed like their entire focus, and of course there was a different coaching staff, but it seemed like their entire focus was to beat the Patriots. I think they played them in like week 4 or week 5. Everything was about getting back at the Patriots, and they beat them, right? And then the season fell apart, and they lost like 7 straight games. So the focus here has to be not get back. It has to be a very mature approach. And the thing is, with Chris Jones coming back, the Jaguars actually struggled with their interior 3. It wasn't their best day last week against the Colts, and DeForest Buckner had a field day. And the rest of that line, they were constantly in the backfield getting tackles for losses. What I'd like the Jaguars to do is get off to a really, really quick start. And if Chris Jones is going to play, I want to check him. I want to find out what he's got. And the way you do that, you mentioned you don't know how many plays he's going to run. Now, I don't think you need to make your total game plan about this aspect, but I think any little thing that matters, right?
Absolutely.
I would go tempo. I would check him early to see what kind of football shape he's in. I would do everything that's designed to get him to running, whether it's rollouts, side by side. You got to get first downs. I wouldn't let him rest one bit. And I do that anyway because the Florida heat is supposed to be an advantage for a team that has practiced essentially in 100-degree heat every single day. Let's check and see what's going on. I don't know what the weather's been in Kansas City. And really good teams never really make excuses and use the weather as a reason for winning or losing. But all advantages matter, especially when a lot of NFL games, and we had a tough game last week, they come down to the little small things. So that's a little small thing that I'd like to do early. Incorporate your game plan, but when you're incorporating your game plan, speed it up real quick to see if they can get Chris Jones huffing and puffing and get him on the sideline.
I think that's a great game plan. I think that you look at what this game is going to come down to, and you talk about 100-degree weather, and I understand you're right. Teams aren't going to say that the weather caused issues, but it can cause issues for players. You can get cramps, you can get dehydrated. That's something that you definitely have to watch going into playing in the heat. So something to watch there for Kansas City. And it's been pretty hot in Kansas City, so I think that most of the team is going to feel pretty good about it. But Chris Jones is going to be the big question. But you make a great point. It comes down to the little things. You fight for every single inch. I mean, I hate to say that because it comes from a movie, but you really do fight for every inch when it comes to football, and that is how this game is going to have to be played. You have two teams that faced off in the playoffs last year and did a great job making a great game of it. Obviously, Kansas City came out ahead, but the Jaguars gave them a hard time, and it's going to be something fun to watch on Sunday.
It is going to be something fun to watch. It's going to be a raucous crowd. A little part of me wishes the Chiefs hadn't lost because analytically, I guess that's what it is, or even if it's just football formula, a team that good doesn't start 0-2. I don't care who's missing. They still have Andy Reid. They still have Patrick Mahomes. And they still have the majority of a roster that made it to the Super Bowl. Now, that won't have any effect. That's a fan thing, and that's a media thing. And I've been watching the NFL for 48 years deal where I just don't see teams that good starting off 0-2. So I wish they would have been undefeated coming in because that means it would have been real plausible to believe that they were going to get their first loss. But this is where the maturity of that team, the growing up process of Jacksonville has to come into effect. The Chiefs are going to give the Jacksonville Jaguars their biggest and their best. And there's a chance that even last week, had the Chiefs not played a team as good as Detroit and that has the makeup with Dan Campbell's bunch, I think 80% of the league, the Chiefs beat them last week, regardless if Chris Jones or Travis Kelce's there. And they could have won that game had they not had the drops. So everybody needs to pause a little bit on thinking, is this the end? Because folks are always looking for the end of something great. I don't think that's the case at all. And I think we're going to have a whale of a game this weekend. Now, we have some key matchups. We talked about them, a couple of them already. We're going to get into even more of that, and I'm going to tell you why. The matchup between Trevor Lawrence, now I want you to hear this, the matchup between Trevor Lawrence and Spags means a little bit more, in my opinion, than any Jaguar against any other player. I'll tell you about that in just a second here on a crossover edition of Locked On Jaguars and Locked On Chiefs. But first, I have to let you know about Jase Medical. Now, we all get sick. We all have things that happen. We just went through a hurricane where a lot of stuff was closed. What if you got sick? You really, really need medicine, especially antibiotic. And the Jase case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. All it takes to get a Jase case is fill out a simple form online, and in some cases, jump on a quick call with one of our board certified physicians. Get ongoing care from our physicians on any treatment related to questions. Doctor created, doctor recommended. Now, what you have to do is you have to be able to medically approach your pain and medically approach all of the things that may go wrong with you. And you definitely get that at Jase Medical. Now, you can save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using my code LOCKEDON at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com right now, and you'll save more than $360 by getting the life-saving antibiotics with Jase Medical. All right, we're going to roll along here on a crossover edition here that we do all the time here on Thursdays during the football season. We got the Chiefs, we got the Jags. The last segment, I allowed Chris to go first. I didn't allow Chris to go first. I just requested Chris to go first. How about that? Now we're going to get to the biggest matchup. For me, anytime you have a quarterback that has tremendous talent, who has a little bit of a reputation of getting off to a little bit of a slow start, you always wonder when that guy's going to grow up and try to stand up like a kid who says, I got this, right? A lot of times those young guys are not battling the other players. They're battling the old 58, 60-year-old coach on the sideline that has been responsible for more than a few Super Bowls, and in this case, Coach Spagnuolo. So I think the biggest thing for me is Trevor staying balanced and not getting into a bit of a chess match or a checkers match with Coach Spags. I believe they have to design, even if it's something as simple as putting the wide receivers in bunch formation so he sees things really, really quickly, getting the ball out of his hand. Spags does a really good job of knowing how to generate pressure, when he's going to generate pressure, whether with linebackers in the A gap, even sometimes safeties coming, in the way that they mix and match their stunts. And now with Chris Jones coming back, that's just going to be an added person that they have to watch out for, and even sometimes double on passing downs. The key for me with Trevor Lawrence is to not get in long down and distance situations, which allows Spags to do what he has always done, and that is dial up some stuff. We saw it in the Super Bowl where it got really hard for Philly late in the game because of the way that he was able to do some things defensively. Early in the game, they scored touchdowns. I think the linebacker still scoring touchdowns. In fact, the kid out of Missouri. So the thing is we have to make sure that Trevor stays dialed in, doesn't put too much on himself, and just goes with the game plan. And don't get to the point where you're matching wits with a coach. It's not you and him. Let it be him and Doug. Don't do too much audibling. Don't do too much changing. Let Doug match wits with him. And then from that point, I think if the game plan is pretty simple, you just keep everything simple, be patient, and take what they give you. And I think the Jaguars can have a good chance at victory.
I love that matchup. And the reason I love that matchup is because I think you can extrapolate it to even say it really becomes down to your weapons. Trevor Lawrence is part of that, but you have the weapons. Calvin really looked fantastic last week. Zay Jones looked good last week as well. Christian Kirk didn't have the best game, but he still played okay. And that is going to be a unit going up against Spags and going up against the secondary that's going to be very hard for Kansas City to defend. So I'm really curious to see how that plays out. When you flip it over to Kansas City, though, honestly, what it comes down to for me is, do the wide receivers change what they did last week? And matchup-wise, it's going to be a matter of, can they find the soft spots in zones when the Jags play zones? Can they beat man when the Jags go man-to-man? That was an issue last week. If you go back and watch some of the film, the biggest thing Kansas City did to beat themselves is they weren't in the right spots when they were supposed to be there. A great example of that is you have Richie James and Kadarius Toney running a mesh concept over the middle of the field. Richie James gets about 2 yards too deep and ends up running right in front of Kadarius Toney as the ball's coming and Toney drops it. It should have been an easy first down, and it would have given them a chance to score a touchdown instead of a field goal, which would have helped win them the game against the Lions. So, can Kansas City's wide receivers really figure out the defense of the Jaguars when it comes to, zones? Blitz is part of it as well, but zones, man coverage, how the Jags are going to defend them, that's all going to be a big question in this game to me.
It will be a big question, and I'm glad you mentioned that because with the way the Jaguars are going to play defense, here's what I would expect that at some point defensive coordinator Mike Caldwell addresses with the team. You want to get after the passer, and you want to knock Patrick Mahomes off of his square. But when you when you make him play off schedule, he's just as good as he is on schedule, okay? And you knock him off of his square, you think, okay, a right-handed quarterback, if I don't allow him to scramble right, if I make him scramble left, where his throwing shoulder is actually closer to the receiver, All of that stuff goes out the window because Patrick Mahomes will throw it any kind of way. He'll throw it backhanded, underhanded. He might do it
Left-handed.
the way you used. Yeah, he might do it the way you used to do those little footballs. Ain't no telling. He might thump the ball 30 yards down the field. What I think is find a way to play a little bit of gap and hole where you get pressure, but it's controlled. It's to the point where you don't allow him to spin away. You don't allow him. You don't create these natural running lanes by getting beyond him.
Yeah.
Because those creases are easy. Now, it's still more difficult with him because we saw in the Super Bowl, we saw that kid drop back like 47 yards against the 49ers. There's no point where he won't keep going backwards because his arm is so strong he can make up for it. So the thing is don't get mesmerized and don't allow the one or two plays that he makes like that to frustrate you and cause you to start getting out of character. You have to be disciplined. You have to stay within your lane. You have to make sure you set the edge with this team. And don't just think
that is exactly what I was going to say when you started talking about staying in your lane. You have to set the edge against Mahomes. If he gets outside, that's a problem.
Yeah. So it's like pick your poison. And my thing is you got to make him do one thing. And he does whatever you want. If you want him to scramble around, he does that great. And if you say make him stand in the pocket, well, it's not like we're talking about a guy that can't read defenses. So, but what I don't think, you just can't give him the whole buffet because you give him the whole buffet, now your head's going to start spinning. Just make him, you got to cover. I think if you want to play man-to-man, the best way to play man-to-man is to make sure you don't allow him to have running lanes because that's when being a man-to-man gets you in trouble when your back is to the quarterback. So I really believe all of these things are super, super important. I think for fans, though, the most important thing is what leads to a win. And in segment number 3, both of us are going to talk about what leads to a win. That's a hypothetical, but then we're going to put the pressure on each other and we're going to actually choose who wins the game. And I'm going to even give you a score. You can give one if you want to, but we'll do that in segment 3 here on a crossover with Locked On Jaguars and Locked On Chiefs in just a second.
And I want to tell you about our friends over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the most fun I've had, winning up to 25 times my money this football season. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. PrizePicks is really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. PrizePicks offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL using code LockedOnNFL. Daily fantasy sports made easy.
All right, third and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars and Locked On Chiefs, the crossover edition, brought to you by PrizePicks. Thank you very much for that read, Chris. All right, so what we're going to get into now is this. And you guys know the deal here. We're going to let Chris lead us with what leads to a win for KC. Then I'll say what leads to a win, a hypothetical what leads to a win for Jacksonville. And then, drum roll, we're both going to make a prediction. I kind of know what his is. I think you might know what mine is already, but I'll even go a little further and give you a score and tell you how the game is going to go. So, Chris, let's get to what leads to a win for Kansas City when they come to Duval.
Quite frankly, this is a little bit different than it usually is for me. And I'm going to say what leads to a win for the Chiefs is holding the Jaguars to 21, 24 points or less. Generally speaking, I think that if Kansas City's offense plays even just a smidge better than what they played last time, they probably score 27, 28 points. Their offense is very capable of scoring points quickly. Last week, it was a bunch of different things. I just can't see them having that type of same output. So to me, it's a question, can you slow the Jaguars down? Can you slow their offense down? I mean, you have firepower with your wide receivers. You have a great running back in Travis Etienne. Trevor Lawrence is one of the best QBs in football. And the question when it comes to this game becomes, is your offensive line going to be whole? You have a couple of guys, center and your guard missed practice today. Chris Jones coming back, maybe that's going to be something that he can take advantage of. But even if he can't, that's going to be a question of, can they keep Trevor Lawrence upright? I would imagine Spags is going to try to test anybody that's in there that isn't a normal starter. And, if they can slow the Jaguars down, obviously I think they're going to have a better chance of winning the game, because I do think their offense is going to be much better this week, regardless of whether or not Travis Kelce plays.
All right. So what leads to a win for Jacksonville is how many times the referee can actually call false start on Jawaan Taylor. That's
Hold
not
on.
That's not really it. That's not really much, but I had to bring that up. And then let me tell you why.
Fine.
Because a lot of the national guys picked up on that and they went crazy with it, right? And we're laughing because everybody knows, listen to this podcast, Jawaan Taylor was a Jaguar for 4 years.
That's why I'm laughing so hard.
And I wanted them to actually keep him, but I understand the economics of it. And then they drafted Anton Harrison, and that's fine. And he looks like a really, really good player. In fact, his ceiling actually looks a little bit higher than Juwan's. I wanted them both. You know what I'm saying? Keep Juwan and put him on the other side, and then move somebody else
to be a good offensive lineman.
Right. So the deal is, I asked him. He had never gotten called for it. And I asked him at a press conference, I said, hey, man, does the other coach or you ever hear them complaining to the referees about you jumping? So everybody laughs, and he smiled, and all the other media guys, I remember Mike DeRocco from ESPN goes, if you get caught this week, it's on him. And I be doggone it, did they not catch him? And he smiled about it, because it's like, and I was jinxed, man. People would hit me up like, man, you jinxed him. But it's going to be really, really funny. In fact, I'm going to ask the fans on Friday, how many times do they catch him? When do they catch him, and how many times do they catch him? We'll figure out if they're going to get him. No, but seriously.
And the worst part, really quick, just the worst part, when they caught him last week, was they caught him right after they caught the other tackle holding. So it became a double dip situation where it really hurt Kansas City's chance of even having a chance at coming back in that game.
So really, let's tap into that real quick before I give you what I think it takes to win. Joe Goodberry, who does some work in Cincinnati, he told the Bengal fans, don't be tripping, because he showed their guy, the offensive tackle Williams, he showed him doing the same thing. So it turns out moving your back foot before the snap isn't a penalty. I had no idea. They said by rule, if that foot moves back or shifts, it's not a penalty. So that's what he's really doing. But the thing about Jawaan is he's not even looking at the quarterback, and he is timing that thing every single time. So it's just like, either he's like the best in the world at paying attention to what the cadence is and what the snap count was supposed to be. He's better than anybody I've ever seen doing it, because I see running backs jump. I see
the funny thing,
wide receivers jump.
Yeah, the funny thing is, you mentioned that, and I'll let you get to your point in just a second, but I just want to say, watching the preseason, it was interesting because Shane Buechele came in, and Jawaan Taylor actually got a false start penalty, I believe, in the preseason, because he wasn't used to the cadence. Mm-hmm. So I really do think he has got the cadence down of his quarterback so well that's one of those things. So kudos to him. He's taking advantage of everything he can.
Yep, no doubt about it. So what leads to a victory for Jacksonville? I think they have to stop the run. And the reason why, and I know I told them not to have a hangover about the game and the AFC, the divisional game from last year. But for me, I remember when Mahomes got hurt and Chad Henne came in the game, and the Chiefs literally went 97 yards, and most of it was running the ball. So you can't forget about that aspect just because we're used to the Chiefs being able to throw it all over the lot, and we're used to them putting the ball in Mahomes' hand, dropping back 40 times a game. You have to make sure that you don't leave any stone unturned, because if Andy Reid sees a weakness, he's going to attack it. And those 7 points ended up being the difference. That 97-yard drive was demoralizing. And that gave the room that Kansas City needed for Jacksonville to then be in catch-up mode, and nobody ever wants to be in catch-up mode. So to me, that's the key for Jacksonville, stopping the run, along with all of the other stuff. But you just can't forget that. Don't allow them to turn around and start handing the ball off to Pacheco, and he starts chunking through the middle of your line, because now that's going to open up everything else that we don't, want to happen. So to me, that's the key, stopping the run. And I know I sound like a 1980s NFL coach when I say that, because it's so cliche. But in this case, I have a reason to, because I watched it last year, and I thought the inability to stop the run when Mahomes went out of the game eventually cost them the win.
Ryan Tracy would love that answer, actually, and so he would really appreciate you saying that. I also have to say, when you look at stopping the run, I think you also have to bottle up Mahomes. If you can keep Mahomes under 20 yards, 25 yards rushing, you got to feel pretty good about that. And it's not that he rushes a ton, but he gets outside the pocket or he sees you're in man and he goes right down the middle of the field for 10 or 15 yards. That flips the field at times, and that can really change an offense's momentum.
All right, you're the guest of honor. Since I'm officially the home team, I'll need you to make a prediction. If you're comfortable with the score, cool. If not, just give me a prediction of what you think is going to happen in the game. Who's going to win it?
You know, I picked Kansas City win last week. I thought they could win against the Lions. And you know, you said it earlier, if they catch a couple of balls, I think they win that game without, you know, Chris Jones or Travis Kelce. But you know, with Chris Jones coming back this week and their offense playing as bad as it did last week, there's a couple of things that I think work into their advantage. One, they all know how bad they played, and they're not going to make the same mistake twice. That's one thing you don't generally see it from any Reid team is he gets things like that figured out. And I guarantee you Patrick Mahomes is coming into this game pissed off because he was embarrassed last week. He came out and said he was embarrassed that they lost that game. And I can understand why. I mean, it was so many different things that went wrong for that team. I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm just saying they understand why they lost. And I think that that's going to be a big thing going into this game. So I'm picking Kansas City. I'll feel a lot better about it if they get Travis Kelce back because he just changes everything on offense. And the other thing I will say, and this is going to sound like a little bit of an excuse, but think about it from a perspective of this. Andy Reid and all the offensive coaches probably game plan for that game against the Lions for 3-4 months. As soon as they knew who they're going to be playing, they were starting a game plan for that specific team, and everything went out the window 48 hours in advance. So it's going to be hard if you know, it's going to be easier this week with Travis Kelce if he's back or even if he's not, because they are going to know ahead of time whether or not he's going to be heavily involved in the offense. So I think Kansas City wins. I'm going to go 28-24 Kansas City.
All right, nice score. Love your description for all of that. I like how you broke it down. Let me just get to this real quick. Jaguars going to win, man. Jaguar. I don't want you to spit whatever it is you're drinking. I don't want it to go all over your computer. Jacksonville Jaguars going to come out. They're going to jump all over Kansas City because here's what happened last week. They played, in my opinion, about 3/4 of bad football. They were losing to the Colts with a few minutes to go, and they ended up winning by 10 points. I think they learned something. And what it is no matter how much you worked to not be just like you were last year, that game looked like a last year game to me. But they found a way to win. And I think good teams find a way to win when everything is not going right. It's the opening day. You want to do good. You've been building up all of this stuff. But football doesn't work that way. Sometimes you can try too hard. Sometimes you have to take into consideration that no matter who you are, the other team, they get paid too, and they put their pants on just like you. And they had some resistance last week. And they had to figure out and gut it out and figure out how to win. That's the first time as the favorite for everyone, you know, as one of the top teams in the league, that they had to face that. And I'm glad they got it out of the way. I think they learned their lesson. I think they come out of the gate this week and take the field by storm. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to blow them out because here's what's going to happen. I think y'all going to storm back. Might even take the lead late. But usually in basketball, what happens, you use up so much energy coming back.
Yep.
Then you end up losing the game anyway. So that's what I think is going to happen. I think Jacksonville is going to win the game 34-31. They're going to beat them. And y'all going to be 0-2. But the key is that gives us a head-to-head advantage plus 2-0, and you guys are 0-2. I know you're going to be there in the end, but that's my thing. So Jaguar fans rejoice. Chiefs fans, sorry. It is what it is. I picked the Jaguars to win, and at least I told you how I think it's going to go. So
really quick.
I
just want to say I appreciate your calling in from the win, but I would point out that Kansas City generally, when they have to come from behind to try to win a game, they generally get it done. They're able to hold on, but we'll see if that ends up being the case this time. So I'm really curious. I'm really excited about this game. I think it's going to be a good one.
Yep, I am too. And you can catch good also on Locked On NFL. Like I said, Monday through Friday, your team every day. Make it your next watch. On YouTube, it's free. Subscribe. You get all of this NFL news from around the league. and it is absolutely fabulous. For Chris Clark of Locked On Chiefs, I'm Tony Wiggins for Locked On Jaguars. Y'all take care of each other, and we will see you next time. Good luck to both teams this Sunday.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily